And welcome back to, actually, this is Artist on Art, but it's a special Gamers on Game. I have the great pleasure of speaking with Steve Whittaker. Steve, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
This is really fun for me. I haven't done a Gamers on Game for a long time, and we're going to be talking about kind of game dynamics or elements from games that you're applying in your work.
And life.
And life.
Yes.
There you go. And you are a professor here at UCSC, and you're in the computer science?
No, I'm in psychology.
But you are working collaboratively.
Yes. So I have projects with computer engineering and computer science, and most of my working career has been in high tech. My background's in psychology. I was a cognitive scientist by training, but most of my life, as I say, has been playing around with tech.
So this is great. You're actually bringing together your psychology with technology.
That's it, yes.
And you're doing it to investigate emotion.
That's it, yes.
Which is not something, I mean, people think computer, steel, hard, fact, 0, 1. They don't think emotion. But of course, we that use the computers are emotional creatures, and so there's a psychology that is there.
Yes, exactly.
And how we use the technology. Yes. And so you're asking some really interesting questions, like, can I use technology to help me regulate my emotions, maybe not get so mad at my kids?
Yes.
You understand that one?
I've never ever had that problem myself as a parent.
Oh, yeah. And
I've seen others, but never me.
Right, and your teenagers have never acted up either.
No, I've never had that problem at all.
No, it's amazing. It's like a miracle. And I'm sure it's because it's all the technology you're using.
That's it, yes. I've been using the technology for over a year now, and that's kind of straightened me out completely.
We're going to have to talk, because I got a business opportunity here. You also talk about personalities, maybe self-reflection. In fact, there was a term that I wanted to talk to you about this, using TMR. That's it, technology-mediated reflection.
That's it.
TMR, technology-mediated reflection. That's a really interesting term in itself that I'd like to talk about. And you also look at it as, how does it help me multitask? Like, how many people out there would love some technology? Well, an iPhone kind of helps you multitask, right? You can stand and
we're
listen.
Trying to do the opposite, actually. I'll talk about that's a separate project. We're trying to stop people ineffectively multitask. So we're trying to give you some insight into your time management and time usage on your computer, and maybe be a bit more focused when you want to be.
Now, see, that's really interesting, because when I was in college back in the 80s, I took a time management class as a part of my supervision associate's degree. And you know what time management was back in the 80s? Paper management. It was like, how many times are you going to move that piece of paper? Take the paper, do what you got to do, and then put it away.
One touch.
Right.
That was the one touch.
Exactly. Yeah. And, some of those things don't apply anymore.
Oh, I think they do.
Well, they do in a way, but there's no paper.
Right. But there is. I was at a very interesting conference maybe a month ago talking about information overload in organizations. And one of the systems that they're trying to, consultants are trying to pass on to large corporations is this notion of one-touch email. So the idea is that you only ever read an email once. So you just look at it, you make a decision about it. If you have to reply to it, you reply to it. But you do not repeatedly access and re-access that. And that has its origination in the systems that you're talking about from many years ago.
Right. Well, I guess it does come around. I was trying to open the window because it's really hot in here. I'm sorry, Steve. Okay. So, one-touch email. And then one of the interesting things that you're also working, all of it's interesting, but what is keenly interesting is the digital breakup.
Okay.
Should we start the conversation with that? This is Steve Whittaker talking about his work in technology-mediated-reflection.
Yes.
Okay, so the scenario. You got two lovebirds. They both are on Facebook. They meet, and they take all these great pictures, Instagram, their whole relationship. 6 months later, the woman leaves the guy. She finds another one. And so what happens?
Well, it's just more complex than it is in real life.
So you can't just tear up the photos in half and burn the other half.
Well, there's two sets of problems. One set of problems which people felt really keenly were surrounding social network sites. So one of the current problems is that we kind of live our lives online through social media now. And so if you break up with somebody, it's not as simple as just basically changing your status, your relationship status on Facebook, because a lot else has to follow. You have a variety of problems now trying to explain to people who are Facebook friends but aren't real friends what happened. Because if you change your status, you get a flood of messages coming in, wall posts, which are saying, hey, what happened?
Right, and now you've got overload.
You've got 600 people, maybe 700 people. I think the average now is around 200, but I guess in the kind of population we're talking about, which is 20 to 30-year-olds, it's more like 500 or 600. You have to give an explanation to those people, and you may not want to, or it may be problematic. That's one issue. Another issue is the question about whether to unfriend the ex. Now, it might seem like that's a trivial decision, but if you were not the initiator of the breakup, you might want to be keeping tabs on that person. It might not be good for you to do that, but we've talked to many people who basically, they just want to track what that person's doing.
Like trolling?
Stalking, basically.
Yeah.
So,
well, they say trolling, but it is stalking.
Yes.
This is so great. I've never, we need this kind of psychological insight into Facebook is taken over. It's like the last 5 years.
Yes. So the problem then for people in that situation is that they're engaging in a behavior which kind of they can do very easily, but which is actually upsetting to them. So we would talk to them and they would say, I can't help myself. It's just so easy to kind of follow that sequence of, status updates and so on. And one of the big problems with Facebook, just generally in relationships, not just about breakup, is it's rather understated and it's rather ambiguous what's going on in there. So even within kind of working relationships, there are all these reports of issues about partners being unaware of the true status of interactions with other people. So there might be somebody, it depends on your gender orientation, but there's always these questions about, when you're talking to that person through Facebook, what's it really mean? So this is exacerbated in the breakup situation because maybe this person's just getting out a bit, right? They're getting out a bit more because they're trying to get over this breakup. The interactions don't mean a lot, but the other person who's in this situation of being jilted, they overinterpret. So it's just so easy now to be in another person's life in a way that it wasn't possible, pre-Facebook, and it's not always adaptive for people to be that way.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I was just talking to a friend of mine. There's a book out about how the studies are showing that the young teen population, the more they watch Facebook, the unhappier they are because they're seeing their friends do all this magical stuff. And they're doing the same magical stuff, but it's always greener on the other side, right? There's this jealousy element, and that. Do you find that correlation too, Steve?
So I've read those studies. So basically, I guess the claim is that people present the positive side of their lives because it's kind of like your social face, and then people misinterpret the social face of others to think that their own life should be better. I guess we did not probe that in this study of breakup, but I can completely see that phenomenon happening. So just to kind of come back to, so one problem is just how to treat that social network status. And then the second thing is really what to do with all your digital stuff, because one of the difficulties with having a kind of digital life on your computer is you're always kind of encountering stuff which reminds you of the other person in quite striking ways. So you go into your music and, you're trying to pick a song or whatever, and that's, easily reminds you of the other person, or you're browsing through the photo collection or even your emails. So one of the problems is that there's this immersive digital world which is always reminding you, sometimes negatively, about the presence of this other person. And that seemed to be a big problem to the people that we talk to.
And so what they do, I'm guessing, is delete. And then 2 weeks from now, they're like, oh, why did I delete the whole White Stripes album?
Yes. So that we found three strategies. One was kind of, and you can see this in everyday life, right? There are people, I guess, I'm trying to remember what the bolter. So there's a term for people who basically...
A bolter,
right? This is a relationship term.
Like on a horse.
Yes, exactly.
They bolt away.
As soon as there's some hint of a problem in a relationship, they just leave, and they don't stay around to negotiate or try and repair. They just go.
Kind of young.
Yeah. So what you have...
How you start out.
Yeah, a bunch of people who they have a problem with their relationship, and they just basically trash their whole digital archive, insofar as they're able to do it. Then you get people who are the opposite, who are the ones who kind of, they're too dependent on it, and they're kind of reliving, maybe not adaptively continuing to relive aspects of their life through that archive in ways that maybe aren't good for them.
It's so psychological. It's so amazing. And this idea that we have to reflect using, or not have to, but in a way we do, because if you're constantly recording life and there's no time to reflect.
Okay, so that's so we can now talk about the Android app that we're so
Echo is what this is called.
Okay, so Echo is kind of it's kind of like a personal Facebook but with reminding. So the idea is that instead of posting public status updates, you're basically posting status updates to yourself. And the idea is that one of the things that we don't have very good intuitions about is our reactions to situations, our reactions to relationships, our reactions to different aspects of things that are happening to us. But now that we're kind of living our lives online, then one of the things we can do is collect digital data about this and kind of hold that up as a mirror to ourselves. So what Echo does is it allows you to kind of microblog aspects of your life, and then you're systematically reminded about those, so you can see maybe patterns of things that made you very, very happy, which maybe you sometimes weren't aware of. And we've had cases of that where people have gained insight into things they did that seemed rather trivial to them, but just gave them a lot of pleasure. Right? Sometimes the mundane.
Zumba class.
Yeah, or, a family dinner, something which you wouldn't, if you say to people, what makes you happy, they'd say, maybe vacation of a lifetime, or, a fantastic meal at a really expensive restaurant. But in fact, when we look at these logs, which people share with us, then we find sometimes the mundane is really, really important to people, and it's not something that they often think about. So
that's very Buddhist.
Yeah. So so a lot of what we're trying to do with the application is it's completely consistent with that philosophy, because it's about mindfulness. I guess that's what you're talking
the Zen,
about.
Yes.
So what's kind of also interesting about this project is it's not just about the positive, it's also about understanding the negative. And this to me is a little, it's even more interesting. So there's been some really interesting research on trauma and how people recover from trauma, and also how thinking about trauma relates to psychological well-being. And there's been some really interesting research which has shown that if people repeatedly write about a traumatic episode, then there are these amazing health benefits. So you would just not believe the fact that, for example, If you write about an incident that you found very upsetting in your past, then it reduces your doctor's visits, it increases your immunity to colds, disease, or whatever. Just astonishing data that you wouldn't really expect. So that's also what we're going after in the app. So we ask people to reflect on the negative, and we present back to them past negative events, and they can reflect on those, and they can see how... Well, we can sort of see the mechanism by which they're kind of getting happier through that. Because one of the benefits of looking back at your past is you don't usually feel as strongly negative about that incident as when it occurred. Sure. I mean, there are exceptions, but largely because you're not in that situation anymore, things have moved on, so you feel better about it. So one of the inferences that we see people drawing under those circumstances is about their own resilience. Right? So what they can see is, I'm feeling better about this really bad situation, right? It shows that I've got past it, it's in a box or whatever, and they draw the inference that they are they're a person with resources to deal with similar incidents in the future. So we see both the positive and the negative coming through. And we have, what's really exciting to us is that we have data along kind of standard psychological well-being scales which show that if people use our system for even a period as short as a month, then we can increase their well-being.
How do I get one, Steve?
Well, you're an iPhone person, aren't you?
Well, my husband has an Android.
Okay,
so
I can share. At the moment, we don't have a Google Play app, but I'm very prepared to share the application because we're moving into a new phase, and we're always looking for friendly users to give us feedback.
So, Steve Whittaker, where can people go to find out about the Echo?
Oh, so we have there's an Echo website. So I guess if you just type Echo or technology-mediated-reflection, or they can visit my website at Steve Whittaker UCSC, and that will direct you to materials, including the video. Which is just a quick run through, kind of how it works or whatever.
So, fascinating stuff. I love what you're doing. There's so many applications that I can think of. People with Alzheimer's being reminded of.
So one direction we're going in now, which I'm finding very. So we kind of built this as a well-being app, which was to help people kind of moderate their emotions in the way that we talked about. But we found that people have appropriated the application in really interesting ways to engage in behavior change. So what we're seeing in the logs, which I should emphasize, people have freely shared with us and they're anonymized. So we see people trying to take on problems in their everyday life using Echo to help them. So people would do things like they would set up a goal, which might be like to exercise more or to eat more sensibly, and then they will use the reminding aspect. So what happens with Echo is you do a post, and then a month later, a few weeks later, it reminds you about that. So if you've set yourself a goal of exercising more, the system might come back and remind you you've set that goal, or it might remind you how good you felt after your kind of gym workout, where you've said, gym workout, I feel fantastic. System comes back. So people are using that as a kind of motivator for themselves. So we're seeing all sorts of kind of life problems being so we've seen people try and tackle sleep, smoking, money, of course, relationships, stress. So in each case, what they're trying to do is they've analysed the problem in their lives, and they're trying to use Echo to kind of reflect on that problem, set themselves goals, and kind of use the fact it reminds them to kind of keep a hold. So I guess it's like a rather annoying parent or, a spouse who's trying to help you with a problem, just there saying, you said you would do whatever, right? Are you doing it? Or in good cases, when you've done that, it reminds you that you've done the thing you wanted to do and you felt good about it.
It's fabulous. Echo, folks. I want one. I don't know if I could give up my iPhone for it, but hopefully you guys will come out with an
Well,
iOS
we're working on the iPhone app at the moment. It's just that's a more difficult development environment for us. It's just not as open. So that's.
Professor Steve Whittaker. That's right. That is the problem with the iOS system. It's not an open source. Dag nabbit.
Yes.
Steve Whittaker, he's talking to us about his work here, where he's bringing together psychology and computer science and using what he's calling technology-mediated reflection, and how our smartphones can aid us in that, and a lot of the messy parts of having digital possessions online for public consumption after maybe you don't want it there anymore.
Yes.
So much of what our kids need to do is learn about managing their online identities. This is identities that they may have for the rest of the... You know how they say this is going to go down on your record in high school? This is going to go down on your record your whole life, possibly, probably. Yes. Your grandkids are going to be able to go, Mom, great mama was, half naked in Facebook, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the family might forgive, but I think the employer, there might be issues with employers. I think that's... And certainly it's interesting to project forward to think about what politics is going to be like in 10 or 15 years' time, because now it seems like you can hardly breathe, and still be president, right? Because the second somebody steps forward, put themselves up for president, they are researching their past. Now with all this... So I think it's going to transform so many aspects of our everyday lives.
I'm so glad this wasn't the case in the 80s. That's all I can say. Because now my kids wonder, but their kids aren't going to have to wonder.
Yes.
Yeah, they could just Google search them.
Yes.
Steve Whittaker. Thank you so much for coming on. We got a couple more minutes. And then we've got Indie Babies coming up next. Steve Whittaker, you're going to Paris.
That's right.
You lucky ducky. And you're going in April. What are you going there for?
So we have 3 presentations. So we're going to give, I guess, the first public talk on Echo. So we have... really happy about it. We were nominated for a Best Paper at a really competitive human-computer interaction conference. So we'll receive an award for that. And so we have a presentation on the ecosystem where we'll be talking about the kind of stuff we've just been talking about.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, the algorithms, how you built it is really fascinating. Also, we need another show for that. But go on.
So we can talk about that. And then we have another paper which is looking at... I'm working with IBM on a system which is... So a lot of companies are now trying to use social media tools to help their employees. So if you're an employee in a large corporation, you have a question about your work or maybe an HR question. Now a lot of employers are trying to use social media to help people with this. So I with IBM are building a bunch of tools to help people who run social media communities to help corporate employees. So we have another paper about that. And let me just think. The third paper... sorry, I'm blanking on that now.
That's okay. Steve Whittaker.
Oh, it's the breakup one, yes.
The breakup!
Yes.
Yes. Very interesting stuff. Folks, you've been listening to Gamers on Game, a special show today with Steve Whittaker. Have a great trip, Steve. Please come back on. Tell us how this is all progressing. I find it fascinating. Everybody, please stay tuned for Indie Babies. And thanks for listening. If you missed any part of the show, there's going to be a great video. Steve is wearing the best shirt. And you'll be able to see it at artistonart.com. And you'll have a podcast. And thanks again.
Thank you,
Steve.